So is that working?
We're recording.
Okay, very good. Yeah, my computer has something that it wants to close, but I don't know. It might be Zoom, and if it does, I'll have to log back in, but we'll see. But the topic was source, oversoul, and self. And when I talk about self, I really, talk about the divine self or the God self, the Godhead. There's a lot of different ways to describe it and to understand it and to know what's going on there. But the question that we're hopefully trying to find, and what I work toward constantly, and since I met Audley, many years ago, and I shared some of that in the lectures, and I like to talk about him, talk about the experiences of meeting him, and talk about the teachings as I remember them and as I apply them, and then as I find areas of life that maybe I can't find something that he said or don't remember enough of what he said about how to correct a particular item or how to change myself in some way or how to modify my behavior. Then I go back to what he said, and then I go deep into my own self and say, please bring to me the things that I need to help me unfold and to help me understand this. And as I do that, I find that, in some cases, as I'm digging through some of the archives I have of my notes and his lectures and things, I find something. Sometimes I find areas where it doesn't seem like it was addressed. And it could be that he talked about it all the time, and I was just not able to hear it because of my own point in development at that time. It could be that it hadn't come up as issues, or it wasn't areas that he had knowledge or experience in, hadn't been asked about it. And it's ironic, in many of the early days, um, you know, all I could do was sit and listen. It's just like I rarely had questions. I I had some in my mind, but I couldn't speak them. I could just I could kind of witness what was going on and watch. And and so the times now I think are much different, because as I have a better understanding or grasp of some of the information, now I have lots of questions, and it would really be a lot of fun to have Audley around so that you could ask the questions. And since he's not here in the physical body, it's just like I go into the self or inside or into the image that I find in myself, or into the light that he imparted. Then I ask the question there, and then I see what unfolds. And as I was digging through a lot of some of the old video lectures and audio lectures and stuff, and a bunch of notes, looking for stuff, there was one area in particular that I kept trying to find a way to, or find information about how to release some of the energy that I had caught in my own centers or in my own life. Some of my habits that I needed to change and release. And so a lot of times our habits are very subtle, so we don't necessarily, um, aren't able to bring them forward in a true sense, but and maybe not be aware of them. But he gives us tools to help us, explore our inner being. And the tools are very simple things, like 12 little cards that you can read through and journal and look at your life and try to understand what you're attached to is, and what you're suffering from, what makes you feel good, what makes you feel bad. What is it that you cannot get out of your mind? Have you been wounded or hurt or broken in some way, maybe through abuse, through trauma, through war, through living the process in life, through difficult situations as a child, um, bullies that may have come into your life. There's things that sometimes distort our view of the world or cause us to withdraw. And pull back into ourselves. And then sometimes it's even the religion that we were taught as a child. We may not feel worthy. If you grew up in the U.S., in Oklahoma, which many of us did, and you were probably involved in some of the Christian traditions there, and some of them were very extreme into helping you to know how bad you are and how sinful you are, and how mistaken you are and how unworthy you are, and there's some benefit to that, but it can do a lot of damage also, and into the spirit, and to the point that even when you find an opportunity to I guess know more about the truth in life, you're not able to, because you hold yourself back in some way. But there are a lot of things that we can do, I think, to make changes in ourselves, and to make changes in the experiences that we have in the depth of our own being. And what hopefully people, I think I was encouraged by people saying they found this useful. And, I find it useful to be able to share these. And I've done it in different ways in the past, in different groups, different ways, with small settings, one-on-one and things like that. But it did seem like it was time to be more, I guess, outgoing and more in the world right now. And some of the things, I think, just due to, as Catherine pointed out, the issues that we're all dealing with from the pandemic and things like that can really be difficult for people. Isolation is hard on human beings. One way to punish people, and even in our our systems, our prison systems and things like that, the most severe punishment is often, to put them in solitary confinement, not let them have any contact with other human beings. And that can be, it can be devastating to some people. It can destroy them. They simply cannot deal with it. Other people do fine. Some people, if you were maybe had practiced meditation for 50 years and found that what was going on was very useful for you, then being in solitary confinement might be a blessing, because no one would disturb you, and you could meditate as much as you want during the day. Where in my world, there's not a constant flow of disturbances, but there's disturbances. So I use those as opportunities to be able to improve or enhance or expand my consciousness. And it's become a very useful thing for me in that sense. So let me see if I can get the slide to open now. Okay. And the things I really wanted to talk about in this is the soul. And normally, when we look at Audley's drawings, and this drawing that he provided, or I call them maps of the kingdom, this part up here, the Great Supreme, where we come out of that, that's in a sense source. And it's manifest as it comes down one of these rays, manifest in a form, and that form, as it begins to take form, it actually has an image and likeness to the Great Supreme itself. And each one of these rays that go out actually creates a form. And what I see when I experience this is this is really a sphere, not a flat, circle on a felt pad drawn in, nice radiant chalk, but it's actually a sphere. And it's hard to draw the inside of a sphere and show all these things and then all these things on the outside. And then when I look at it, even in going deeper into it, I find that all of the Great Supreme and stuff is really right in the center of what Audley would often refer to this as the Oversoul. And but it actually, rather than being bigger and it's a small part for me, for some reason, in the way I perceive it, it's smaller and more compressed and definitely deeper and inside that awareness, and it kind of comes out of itself. And then even the rest of the kingdom that we talk about, I see all of that compressed, and it shows up in the top of the head, um, and and it can do that. But when you go into it, you can see it in this way or expand it in this way, and it can be very useful. And then if we want to meditate, I want to go just before we meditate, I wanted to say this looks a lot like rocket science. I mean, all these things we're dealing with sometimes get very complex. There's a lot of forces and, you know, pluses and minuses and negative and positive and male and female and lots of ways to look at it. And it can be quite complex and quite difficult, but it's the whole point of the teaching, and especially what Audley was trying to share, I think, is that it can be simplified. There are a few simple things that you can do. And then if you practice those with devotion, you can move into it. And what happens is you can find the light within yourself. And I think that's a good image to to kind of hold on for our for the meditation. But what I'd like to do is a little different. Rather than just a brief meditation, it seems that most of the people here have some experience with this teaching, this tradition. Most everybody either was directly involved with Audley or have been involved with those who knew him and who carry the teaching, the Dharma, the practices, the devotion, the classes, who continue to do those and deliver information and help you to connect with that. But as we go into a meditation, what I'd like to do is, in doing things differently, is first, since most everyone that spoke seemed to have a level of awareness that would understand what the Kriya traditions are and that movement of energy. And I like to start any kind of meditation. I usually start with running a few kriyas in my own energy field, and I do that to find balance and to find harmony and to find peace inside myself. And so I'd ask you just to focus at the base of your spine. If you know the Kriya Pranayama process, then do that. If not, just focus at the top of your head and try to hold your consciousness there and concentrate for a few moments while we're doing this. And we'll do a little bit of a guided meditation, but you know, it's like the guided will be kind of instruction in terms of helping you to focus your own awareness in your own mind. And then as we move deeper into that, it'll be really what you can hold in your own concentration and your own awareness in terms of what you will experience. And I think, as Catherine pointed out also, sometimes doing this as a group is very helpful. And, you know, and it's listed in or identified in all of the traditions in all of the religions of the world, that the group is a key component, or bringing humans together of a kind, the same devotion, the same type of heart, the same type of belief, intensifies and kind of magnifies or amplifies the experience that people have. And I think that's part of the reason why we come together as human beings, why we come together um, as male and female, or as positive and negative, you know, and however that body may be expressing. But we find wholeness or oneness, or we find a better way to complete ourselves in becoming in sharing and remembering the teachings and remembering the impact of the teacher in your life. And those memories are probably the most precious of all, because they help, if you go back through those in your meditation and you contemplate them, they take you back to that point in time where you experienced his presence, his awareness, his energy, And then, in time you find that it's not gone with him passing. It really depends on your devotion in terms of how real and how deep and how complete it may be in your own life and in your own being. So focusing at the base of the spine, if you know the Kriya Pranayama, otherwise at the top of your head. Let's do a few Kriyas. I like to do anywhere from 3 to 12, and that kind of balances my energy and calms my mind. So we'll take just a few moments and do the Kriya, and then what we want to do is end up centering at the top of the head. And then as you relax and still the mind, focus at the top of the head. And we'll use that as an anchor point throughout this meditation. And if you find your mind wanders, just try to feel the pressure, focus at the top of your head and feel that pressure of awareness. And if you can, feel the breath moving in and out through that opening. And just go back to there and center there, and then let your mind follow the the uh, the guidance in the meditation. And what we want to do is we want to try to move from this point of stillness, into as deep a level of ourself as we can. And I think one thing that I've found in working with people, and especially I noticed it a little more in one-on-one conversations after working with people in groups, and where we're spread out like this, and like in a Zoom session where we're all in kind of a virtual environment, is that sometimes the mind thinks, well, it's not as powerful because we're not physically in the same spot or in the same room or in the same cave doing this meditation or in the same temple. But I'm finding increasingly that it's the focus in the mind, it's the devotion in your heart to want to know your true self, that what really guides and connects. And in the connection in the spiritual realm or in the subtle realm, all you have to do in that realm is to think about where you want to be. And we think, and right now we're thinking and we're focusing on a meditation and as a group. And sometimes you can, as you focus in that way, you can feel the presence or see the faces or see the energy, see the subtle body of those around you, of those that are in this group and that are focused in this way. And that can be helpful. Sometimes you just listen to the voice, and that sound is what takes you into that more unified position where consciousness becomes one. And in a meditation like this, often what Audley would do is he would take his energy and bring it together. and kind of wrap it around us in a way to hold consciousness in one point. And easy way for me to do that is just ask you to focus on his image or on his name. If you don't see an image of him that you're concentrating on, think of his name. Just repeat that over and over. Or if he gave you a mantra in initiations that people talked about, you use that. That ties us into a common one thread, one place, one existence right there in terms of the one pulsation of that mantra and that energy and his presence. And I'm finding that his presence is increasingly strong in the world as people turn to him, and that he was, a great teacher in many realms throughout time. And if you uh, have had those inner experiences with him, you may know who he was in different times and remember him in different points, and that your devotion has brought you to a point where you either found him or you found someone who knew him, or you were born in a situation where the Dharma unfolded or the teaching unfolded, so that you had an awareness. And I think that's important to remember that. And I encourage people to, as often as possible, remember how he touched your life, how he, imparted energy to you. Try to remember the details of when you first met him. Where were you? What was happening around you? Pull as much of that into it. And the way our minds work, we record everything that happens all around all the time, but we have a filter mechanism that filters out based on what we value at the moment. Well, we want to open our filter just a little bit in this component, and when we think of him, we want to remember as much detail as possible. What did were there smells present? Did he have on an aftershave? Were you around in a situation where you could hear him talking? You can remember his voice, or you can play that back. Focus on Audley. Focus on the guru. Focus on the inner part of your own being. And if you remember him from other lifetimes, focus on those memories and let that pull out also, and come back into your consciousness. And simply ask your divine self, help me to remember. Help me to remember the teaching. Help me to remember the guru. Help me to remember the lifetimes that I have known him and been with him. And help me to know myself better. Okay, and then from that focus point at the top of the head, let's move what we would consider up, but let's move into the Buddha consciousness, the Christ consciousness, the golden light consciousness, the awareness there. And as you make that movement, the mind becomes more still and more calm, because to go past this point in the inner world, you start losing duality. This is where the energy divides at that point and becomes the positive and the negative, the male and the female, all the components. They oddly called it the two-pole power. And that power really exists within you, but we want to center in that. Sometimes you can just move into that, and either you have an image that you've created or that you can see and sense in that awareness, in that golden light. And you can embrace that and just absorb it into your being. And as you breathe in, that golden light comes into your body and fills your lungs and dissolves from the lungs into the blood and then flows throughout the body, that radiant consciousness. And this is a place to be grateful for what you're experiencing and for what simply the opportunity to have human form and to be born in a land where there's a teacher that knows the truth and that can show you how to find that truth about yourself. And then let's move from that awareness into the God self, the Godhead, the white light, any way you perceive it or think of it. Some people oddly often spoke of it as Papa, just an endearing term to be one with what he is. And if you can't see and imagine yourself going into that light, into that oneness, imagine him going into it, and then make that movement with him in your consciousness. And as we express, as we come out of the great supreme, it through a desire to know itself, all of these buds or forms or Godheads are created, and it's all a process to unfold and to know, a breathing out, to know all of creation, to know all of what it is. If you anchor in that white light, either anchor yourself in it, if you have that, have developed that skill and that ability, or imagine oddly in it, and simply look at it from outside and ask if it can bring you into it, if it can help open your awareness in a way that you can find fulfillment and truth and understanding in the depth of that being, the depth of what you are. If you are anchored, go deeper into your own being. If you're not, just create the image, the visualization of Audley or whatever teacher that you have the greatest devotion to, and go into that image, into that light. Ask that divine part of yourself to unfold it, to help you experience it more clearly, more deeply, to give you words to be able to define the experience that you have, to help you write out in your journal what you're experiencing, what you're knowing, what you're learning. And as you touch that God self, truly at that point, anything that you have need of, or you information, knowledge, power, anything that's needed, you can simply ask that and let it release into the infinite. Let it release into the oneness. And as you grow comfortable with that, you find that what you release and what you send forth into that realm of the unknown, or the emptiness, the void, the source of all creation. What you release and project into it is what comes back into your life. And so it becomes very important to guard your thoughts, to watch what you're thinking, to watch what you're projecting into that formless state. Because whatever you hold in your mind, that's what will come back out of it. So if you want enlightenment, if you want abundance, if you want love and peace and happiness, project those from this level into that oneness, and ask that divine part of yourself to bring that forth in manifestation, to help you know it in your own life and to experience it. And if you had the fourth initiation from him or those in his channel, you were given a mantra, and let that mantra just continue to repeat in the mind. It's a great way to anchor. It's a great thing to project into that oneness. You remember, what you project in, what you see is what you get. Someone mentioned, hoping to have an opportunity in their next life to, again, study and learn from Audley as the master. And when you're in this state, let that desire, let that expression, let that devotion flow into the infinite, and let it begin manifesting and coming back into your awareness. And as I go into that, I ask that divine part of myself to touch each one of you, to help you to know in your own awareness, in your own consciousness, to bless you and to guide you into that feeling of what you truly are. Now begin to bring that energy, that awareness, that light, that presence, bring it back into your more of the gross realm or the physical consciousness. And the way I like to do that is I simply bring that energy, bring that Godhead awareness down into the head until the head is filled with the light. I think of Audley and I feel his presence and his awareness and his light merged with mine. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. But express your gratitude, express your oneness with that. And then as you open your eyes and come back into consciousness, hopefully you can retain that light and that awareness and that gratitude as you go through your day and expand your awareness. And then the kingdom Some of these I've used before, but it's just like it's a place to start. And we talk about the experiences that you can have as you move through that. We talked about being in this light, which is really being in the center of this soul, which is being in the center of this. As you let the form world drop from your consciousness, and you go into the formless, in a sense, or into the place where there's no duality. There's no this and that. There's no up and down, pain and no pain, suffering and no suffering. All things blend into that. And when you get in it, all this gold light rings that I see up here, and even the radiance around the Godhead that's drawn, I see that as the bliss sheath, or the covering over the soul. And it's an energy, or in some traditions it's even a wind, or it's a flow of energy that goes through the nadis, or through the central channel, the Sushumna, the Ida and the Pingali, all of the centers and energy channels in the body. All of that energy is an expression of this great supreme awareness. And generally in our life, we have only a small part of that awareness that we can deal with on a daily basis. And we may use it to do things with our hands, or to do things with our mind. And we work, and we have our place in the world, and we interact. But when we sit still, we can go back and touch that. And when we start touching that, or bringing that together, it's beginning stages. When you feel that bliss, or that awareness, that tingling, that sensation that comes in with all knowing, and just great happiness, it's that bliss. But it means that you're getting close to touching the center part of all of these. And sometimes a teacher will even say, it's great to experience that bliss, but it's easy to get hung up there. It's just like, there's bliss junkies or bliss monkeys, and that's all they want to do is go sit in that and stay there forever. And that's one of the expressions. I'm sure we all go through it as we develop our soul, and we sit there until we realize that, well, there's others that are suffering. Maybe we can help them in some way. And so Audley taught us to always be of service, and very much like the Buddha, to be always giving, like the Christ, to even giving when they have no food to eat, he gives them bread to eat and fishes to eat, and nurtures the body as well as the soul. Those are the great masters can serve in that way. But that's a part of what we are. But then the intelligence sheath, or the wisdom, some call that the bodhicitta. It's pronounced in several different ways, and depending on what tradition you're from. That knowledge and that wisdom, when you touch the emptiness, or when you touch the oneness, or when you touch the completeness, the fullness of all being, and which is past the bliss, then that wisdom that comes back, as that wisdom, that bliss comes back, or as you come back in your mind, it begins to express in a very beautiful way, in that you can simply know what the truth is about life, about what's going on in your life, about where you need to be next, about the people that come and go in your life. You can experience a great number of things from it. And then if you come back, and this is where most of us spend our time in meditation, is the mind sheath. And in the Hindu traditions, they talk about these sheaths like their bodies almost, or like their shields, their energy fields around us, and they have a reality in a sense, but they're different aspects of what we are. But in the mind sheath, here the mind is more of what we would think of as the brain and the activity and what's going on. But there, it truly is an organ of thought, and what it sees or what it experiences is the thoughts that arise in the mind. And those thoughts can come from the divine. You can ask a question and a thought will come back, and it will manifest in form there. And if you've developed the ability to see those thoughts or to see that information clearly, you can understand it. You can know the source. You can know that it's true, and that you can do something with it, and you can utilize it. But you can also sit there, and every time you try to meditate, the pizza comes up, or the chocolate milkshake, or the cheeseburger, or I know Audley just love those little chocolate things that they served at Wendy's, the little frosty. He really enjoyed going there after a lecture and having his frosty. And and I learned to eat the frosties, and they had, I think I ate more than he did. I'm bigger, but you have to be careful what's in that thought field. You can get lost in it. It's an organ of thought. And then the vital force sheath, it's manifest as the breath or the winds in the body. It's the prana. It's what we use to focus our mind and focus our energy and awareness. And if it's out of control with that vital force, you can be having a panic attack or an anxiety attack, or you cannot be able to focus and get things done. You can be hysterical, out of control in the extreme, or you can be able to monitor, control the breath, and you can control whatever state of mind that you're actually in, and even control what happens in the physical body by controlling the breath. And that's the kingdom, and that soul is what we try to experience and be a part of. And some of that, from that light presence, that pure existence, we it comes down into us and expresses as this form. And you're expressing as you, and I'm expressing as me. And if we get very still and we get together, and there's a harmonious, or uh, I guess common devotional feeling, we can blend our energies, and we can experience both parts of each being. And I think a lot of times this is what everyone, or many people, I would say, are looking for. Is they're looking for love. They're looking for some way to fill that emptiness that they find inside themselves, inside their own consciousness. They may not feel complete. They may not feel whole. They may think, well, if I could just find the perfect mate, I could be okay, or the perfect friend, or the perfect pet, something that could fill the holes that I have in my energy fields. And as we express, and as we come down and we take on our karmic load, as I look at people and see chakras and centers and things like that, I see that when they are struggling with things, they have distortions in these fields. And I've tried to show in some ways how the petals may be damaged or twisted or bent or broken or completely missing, like a hole in a center. And when that happens, there's a lot of things that manifest, like we talked about at different points, where if you have issues in the root chakra, the base center, that manifests most as fear. And then some of these others, it manifests as guilt or shame or grief or truth as we speak from the throat. And that's why if you tell a lie, it can cause your whole body to excrete more fluid. You can become sweaty, and it's a very subtle but a very sensitive device called a lie detector, and it can simply look at it. And that's when we start trying to say things that aren't true, it distorts our energy field in some way. And unless we've mastered the ability of lying to where we don't get physiological responses, that happens all the time. And it can be, I think at this point, it seems like much of the world is pretty good about being able to say almost anything and say it with a straight face. That's learning to master lying and doing it. But all of these aspects are aspects of what we are in this kingdom, and in this divine self, in this source. And hopefully in the meditation that we've gone through, maybe you've been able to experience enough of it that you understand yourself, you understand what you are, and you're not the physical body dangling on the end of a string. You're truly a light body that comes out of nothing, comes out of the void, out of the emptiness, and it expresses as what you are. But it's all an expression trying to know itself and to know what this whole life process is about. I think we can we can go more deeply into that, but I think with time, we're probably at a point where it makes sense to say, let's take a break, and maybe we take a break, and we uh, if you want to actually uh, you know take a break and stop for a couple of minutes, we can. Otherwise, we can take questions and uh, try to go forward from there.
Sounds like everybody's ready to just proceed forward.
Okay. Well, uh, if you have questions, I'm happy to take questions. Um, I'm curious, if people have are able to experience some of these things, if they, your impression, your experience of them from, looks like people are kind of all around the country, but a couple thousand miles away. Um, what's your reaction? Either speechless or you need to unmute your microphone.
Okay, maybe can you open it up for some other questions? I know Catherine was wanting
Yeah.
to,
Any
because it sounds
questions?
like
Any?
whatever, either they are in deep in zone, or and they're
Yeah.
there's not
Did
really.
did everybody come back? Maybe I should say, did anybody besides Connie and I make it back?
Well, I never got to leave because I have to constantly watch to see if anybody's showing up. So I don't get to go anywhere. I get to
Yeah,
monitor.
I'd say if they show up that late, they can sit in the silence and experience it from afar. Yeah, I think when we start recording, we probably just shut it off. It's okay if they'll get the message. It's a meeting in session. Any other questions or comments from anybody?
I can comment about something, just to get kind of started, that even though I didn't set in on the meditation, actually participate in the meditation, as I mentioned, as you saw on Facebook, a week or so ago, I woke up with this bright light, like popping on inside my head. And it was a lovely way to wake up in the morning. But ever since then, it's been a whole lot easier to go into the stillness. So
Yeah.
something happened,
Lots
not
of
sure exactly what, but something happened.
lots of fun things are happening. And I think it's partly some of it is that there's people focusing on it and working on changing and improving their life, and are really sincerely asking within themselves, for guidance and for help, and just like you're finding it's there, it's just like, yeah, it can come. And a lot of the things, like one of the things I guess I've been quite fascinated by in going through this whole series of lectures is there are some areas in my life that personally I've have always struggled with, and as I struggle with those, I know there were a couple. Like one issue was when my father passed away, and that was in 1985. That was very difficult for me. It was like a large part of my world was gone, And I went to Audley, and a lot of times, and he would work on my chakras or centers or things and help me. And then I don't know if he got tired or gave up on that particular thing working, but he recommended that I go see a psychiatrist that dealt with grief. And I did, and it was some, I don't know, I often have no idea how he found these people, but they were always, when he sent me somewhere like that, they were always great resources, and it helped me a great deal to confront some of those issues that I had with my own, with my father, and then to move through that. But I've noticed in the last year or two that some of those issues are still there. Some of the, I would say, deeper levels of issues. And it's kind of like you peel the onion and you find, oh, now I'm getting down to what was really bothering me, kind of stuff. But when that energy surfaces, some of these techniques, especially in the tantric practices, utilize that energy to actually release that blockage or that flow or that issue within yourself. And there's some of the visualizations and the mantras and the various things that are done that are extremely useful. And so I play, as I talk about in these lectures, I play around with those things and practice them many hours a day sometimes. And I'm finding similar things to what you described there. Some things are simply evaporating or dematerializing, or issues that were there that I could not get past in my thinking or in my view of the world. They simply dissipate. They simply go. And I think, wow, that was amazing. And it's just through some of the techniques. So I've been going back, when I find this experience, I go back to some of Audley's lectures or my notes or things like that and say, I must have missed something. It's just like I didn't hear that, didn't get it right at all. It's just like I totally misunderstood that technique or that process. It wasn't unfolding, or there's some things that, it's just like I finally peeled the onion to a point. I wish he was here so I could ask him. He's not, so I ask inside what that awareness is, how I can find my way out of that, and the information, the knowledge comes. And so I think, yeah, it's amazing what can happen.
What I'm experiencing, and I don't know if everyone is or if it's just some people or what, but it does. The peeling the onion thing is clearly happening, in my domain. But I kind of see it. It's kind of like if you've ever cleaned a skillet, the bottom of a skillet that has stuff all crusted on it.
Yeah.
It takes each time you clean it, it removes some of it, and then eventually, if you continue to work on it,
Right.
you'll get down to a nice shiny bottom of the skillet,
Right.
And it does feel like I'm getting close, in my personal life, major life cocoon, the thing that, like, the biggie,
Yeah.
the real central pillar of what Constance Fawcett came here to figure out. It looks like it's getting pretty close, to that.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, and I don't know if that's part of what's happening globally, that there's just all this energy, of cleansing, the scouring, that we're going through, or
I think some of it is clearly a global experience, and it's even a manifestation in the pandemic. And it's another way to look at how that major change is occurring. A lot of things are happening, but I've noticed in myself that I think part of it is age related. Like some of the things that were truly karmic issues that you can't get past them, you have to work through them. And as I work through them and learn those lessons, all of a sudden some of those fall away. And as I would say, some of the really big ones have dropped away in my life. A lot of things became more clear, and it's just like even giving lectures in this format and doing that. It's a whole different way of doing it, but it's a way that feels appropriate for the time and for where my consciousness is.
Okay, so would you say that for the most part, in general, that if we're born with, like, one or two major karmic or tikkun, however, depending on your tradition, issues that need to be worked through and understood and resolved and all that stuff, that they rarely happen early in life, that usually it takes most of the life in order to
It,
work through that stuff.
yeah, in some ways, I'd say that's a useful way to do it. But I think, one of the things that I've explored recently is those of us that were kind of, I guess, with Audley and had an opportunity to spend a lot of time. I noticed that several of us took on very heavy karmic loads. Like when I look at normal people, you reference one or two major issues, and that's typically what people have. And until you work through it, you don't see what the issue is, and you don't see how it's affected your expression and that. But as you work through it, all of a sudden your eyes open up. You say, "Oh wow, how that's amazing! How was I so lost and caught up in that? And why was I treating people in that way?" And then I can see it was because of the karmic thing that I had to understand how it feels maybe to be treated in that way, or how it expresses. But once I'm through it, often the whole thing unfolds. Like I had one series of experiences with my time in Japan when I had some lifetimes there, and it was never in my consciousness until I ended up marrying a woman and then going through a very difficult breakup associated with it, and all of that was tied from that time in Japan. And once I got through it, I could see everything that happened, and then also I could see that several others, like you were there in that period, and Audley was there in that period. There was a whole group of us, and some of the people in the group, from the Lotus Center days, have memories of that time and are even drawn back to it. Like you went there and lived. Catherine goes there and practices and studies, and it's just like different people have had opportunities to really go into it in depth, and maybe you have strong ties to the samurai tradition or things that were going on in that point in history, and so it's quite fascinating, I think, to see it. But as you get through it, then all of a sudden you think, wow, that was a hard one. That was a heavy boulder, and I'm going to put it down.
But it doesn't
And
usually happen early in your childhood, like 30s or 35 or 40. Usually it takes a while for that pattern to play out, because that's how the pattern is designed. Is it designed
yeah,
to play out
well,
slowly?
my perception and what I've experienced is that I created those and set them up. And in this lifetime, I stuck as much stuff as I could in there because I knew I had a lot of help and resources. I had Audley around to help me and guide me and show me how to deal with it. And then areas where he's gone and maybe I'm at a different level of the onion, and I'd love to talk to him and do it, but he's not here. So I talk to him anyway, and then it comes back, and it comes back from any number of sources, and sometimes, I find it in my old notes. Somewhat one of my friends from the old times or the dark times, calls me and says something, and it triggers the memory, and it all comes back. But I think it's very useful. But I see with a lot of people in the world in general, I think they come in with one or two, and some people clean those things up early, and some people come through with a very light karmic load. They've really kind of balanced themselves, and they've worked out. Or in some cases, like Audley pointed this out to me once, there were some people that had horrendous, the last 2 or 3 lifetimes. It's just like everywhere they could blow it, they did. And they got really messed up. And he had pointed this out, and he said, because they had so much difficulty, this time they have a much easier time. It's just like, well, you can't handle 3rd grade. Let's put you back down in 1st grade and give you a reset and start over and let you try to build some of these things in a new way. And so some people have that experience. Some people have just limited stuff to do. And then some people come in, like kind of fully awake and fully aware, and they jump into the middle of it, and they really begin to, to affect the world in positive ways and or in negative ways. But I think it's what we're all learning. Any other comments
I
or
have a
questions?
question, Ben.
Yeah.
We were talking about how, well, you were talking about Tantra, for instance, and all the chanting and stuff.
Yeah.
You showed, had a link to a YouTube of this chanting and everything. Now, I was wondering if listening to the chanting versus actually chanting and learning all those different chants, what the difference is there. That's just one question I've got, but I'll go ahead and end with that one question.
Let's start. Let's talk about that. Yeah, listening to it helps a great deal. But the more you integrate that energy into your own being through trying to learn the chant, trying to learn the mantra, trying to learn the sounds, and it's simply because those sounds, especially as I indicated in the Sanskrit, they stimulate the chakras and centers. And if there's nobody around you to heal those centers, one of the ways that you can do it, it's, self-healing, or is one of the Lama Yeshe, the one that I've been reading some of his texts from. He's written one short little book, and I think it's even in audio somewhere, but it's called Be Your Own Therapist. And he approached it from that way, and how to use that energy that rises in the mind to transform yourself. And a lot of what Tantra does, it's similar to Kriya in some sense, but different in others. It has more detailed, I would say, visualizations and more things that maybe deal with the subtle realm a little more. And oddly seemed to, for him, they were all just opened up. But all the other Kriya teachers I know, they're much more restrictive. They don't usually talk about any experiences in the subtle realm or any of the psychic or mystical or spiritual experiences. They discourage that unless you're talking directly to the teacher, because they say it can trigger the ego to think, wow, look what happened to me, and get out there. But I just say that's a stage that everybody's going to go through anyway. But it's good to be able to share and to talk about those. And that was one of the things I liked about Audley so much, is you could go to him with any of the inner experiences, and he would say, yeah, I know exactly what that is, do this, this, and this. And and it helps you. And he was very open, and he kind of encouraged more than any teacher I've met anywhere for people to talk and to interact and to share those experiences. And I think he did it in such a way that for the most part, people didn't get too bent out of shape with their ego in terms of thinking they were better than others or things like that. It was just along the stage. And, and if you got too wild, he typically, corrected your performance in a minor way, but help you to see what was going on and understanding. But with the mantra, just listening to it, it has an effect. It changes the energy field around you. The more you listen to it, the more you'll be able to hear the distinct words or the distinct sounds that are in it. And if you can concentrate perfectly, like mantras ideally aren't chanted out loud in many cases. What you really want to do is chant them in the subtle body. And a lot of the tantric practices and the visualizations are mastery of that subtle form. And when you master that energy in that form, all of the energy that arises in thoughts, if you have desire, like they talk about, if you're walking along the street and you see this beautiful guy or this beautiful girl and you want to grab them, you want them, you desire, that part of your life, or you're hungry and you see the chocolate shake, and that one's telling me my time is running out. Om Namah Shivaya. But anyway, but as that energy arises, you can utilize that energy of desire to actually release things that are tied up in the chakras. And that's the beauty of some of the tantric practices and texts. And there's a lot of distortion around it. There's a lot of images that people simply misconstrue, but we'll talk about those in another time. But listening is good, chanting is better. And there's some of us that are interested in chanting more together in a group, I've been working with Jennifer Cartwright, and we're going to start a little chanting session. It'll probably be 6:30 Pacific time, which is 8:30, I guess, Central time. And it'll be open on Zoom. Anybody can come in. We just get together, we chant, we meditate, and then we go do our day. But I'll put something out on that in the next few days. And you had a next question. I guess he disappeared.
I have a question, man.
Yes.
I noticed when you were meditating, you have your eyes up, and I always see, in the pictures from Babaji, from all the meditators with their eyes up. I try to do that, but it's hard for me to keep them up. It's just very hard on the eyes. How you do it to make it more, try to do it the meditation.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I know when Audley first, when I first met him and he was teaching, he encouraged you to roll the eyes up, and this is commonly done, to try to look in a way that you're looking out either the top of your head or looking out the third eye, but you roll the eyes back, and it does happen with practice. It gets to where it's easier, and somehow or another it goes in, and rolling the eye up actually changes the brainwave frequencies. It puts you more into an alpha state that's more relaxed, and you can do it anytime. But if it causes pain, if it's too much, you go see a doctor. It could be the muscles in the eyes are damaged in some way that it might not be best. But I think if you practice gently, you do it. And I know even the listening in technique that we do, where we hold the eye closed and roll it back. And I think after having done that for years and years, it's pretty natural. And I know I can feel it sometimes when I get deep inside. I can feel the energy flowing so strongly that I can tell my eyes are rolled back, and that I'm really focused at the top of my head, and I can feel this intense and kind of powerful flow of energy that comes down through me and stimulates the whole body. It's touching that bliss energy, that bliss awareness, but it's a technique, it's just there's a lot of physical things that you can do. There's the mudras, the hand position like we do for meditation. There's all sorts of mudra, different ways to do it, different ways to unfold it, all that. And there's a whole, you could do a whole lecture. There's a whole series, and you can put the body in the right position, just like in doing yoga. You can distort the body in certain ways, and it will cause things to happen in the mind. And we're so interrelated. And so you just practice and utilize the parts that work best for you, and then continue to explore it. But I think, it's just like if you do it too long, then you walk around and your eyes are rolled up. It's just an experience that you'll have. Does that help in any way?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Well,
Okay.
yes.
So I just wanted to say something about what Connie said about people karmically waiting to have their karma show up until later. Oops, my phone's getting low on battery, so hopefully it'll last. But I think it's variable. I mean, from a doctor point of view, I mean, I see a lot of different people in different situations. I think a lot of people have their karma right up fast. They come into certain families to learn certain things, pay off certain things. So, I mean, it's variable. I think in our case, a lot of us who came in to be godly really just came in knowing he was coming. So we just hurried through the channels. And so the family we chose was not necessarily our karma. It was more Dharma related initially. And that may be why a lot of our karmas have been kind of pushed back a little bit, and dealing with them later in life, because we really needed the teaching. And of course, if you have teaching, then you can deal with the karma better.
Right.
But
Yeah.
And you're kind of forced to stand more on your own when the teacher's not here. And although I hate to think about the idea that we're meant to have this time without him in a physical way, that in some ways, you don't get serious about dealing with your life until you have to stand on your own. So,
That's true.
like that too.
Yeah. No, I think every, every student in time has had to deal with the departure of the teacher, and, so that's part of what we do, and that does teach you, it's like moving to the next stage in inner awareness, it's like in a way, if when the teacher is here, it's more difficult to become one with that consciousness, but when they're gone, and you only have that, then I find that it's much easier to go deeper into it and to, just I can focus on his image and just go, all the way into the self. And I can focus on Dr. Thin's image and go all the way in, it's the same channel for me. And through some of the others and some of the other traditions, like the Kriya tradition doesn't place as much emphasis on the guru disciple relationship in the same way. It's more of a devotional way rather than I would say a handing off of the light. And that, even though those ceremonies are given and used all the time, but it's not the initiation process is somewhat different. But Audley was truly a unique individual.
For sure. Well, it's been interesting since she started doing these lectures. I've been finding that some of the lessons Audley taught, I'm finding more subtle messages and teaching within those, and that I didn't even realize were there. And my understanding of his teaching is just becoming even greater. And I really didn't think that there was more depth to it, but there is an incredible amount more.
Oh yeah.
So I really love that.
Yeah, no, me too. In fact, I'm at the point where I think, wow, it's almost here. It's just like I can touch it now. It's kind of stuff. It becomes more real and more intense, and I would say less fear, less uncertainty, more confidence. Lots of changes in confidence, or changes in consciousness, and I think a whole lot of it. Like as I've read some of the stuff in the Tibetan traditions in particular, they say that one of the most important things you can do if you haven't practiced in a long time, it's just, or you haven't been engaged, is to remember how the teacher affected you. Remember the moments and try to even write those down or journal them or share them. And it's one of the things that I've tried to encourage people to do is to express in some way what Audley meant in their life. And I know that when they do that, it will trigger those memories, and what they get now will be a whole different, milkshake than what they got 25 or 30 years ago. It's just like we've grown as people, we've grown in our awareness and our depth, and some people have made some very significant changes in consciousness. And so it unfolds in a much more beautiful way, and you understand it more in a way that I know for me that I never did before.
Well, I will say one thing. I guess this is just an example of one of the ways that my understanding is changing. Audley was amazing. I've never met anybody like him in terms of being able to find the very best part of each person and encourage that.
Right.
And so I always admired that, and I have tried to do that myself when I work with people. But I also am finding that on the other side of the coin, that it's not just finding the best in each person, but it's also accepting the part that is not so great.
Right.
And loving that part too.
Yeah.
And that is just a whole nother level of mastery to be had. That is,
Oh yeah.
wow.
Right.
Amazing. I mean, just the door is at least open into the possibility that
Yeah.
works now, right?
Right. No, I hear that completely. And I had an interesting experience this week along those lines. Is that I'm resident here in a small hotel, and I take care of stuff at night and occasionally, check people in and do things like that. But we had a couple that checked in with some small children, and you know, they got everything in, got in the room, did all that kind of stuff. And then they went to dinner and they came back and none of their keys worked. And to get in the room, and, you know, people get upset about such things, and you know, and they call the number, but it's rolled over to my room so that I can pick it up and, you know, help them if it's after hours. And, you know, it's like 9:30 or 10 in the evening. And so the office is closed and I'm in my room. Unfortunately, I'm taking a shower, so I don't hear the phone ring, you know, and they call several times, you know, and I like, it's been a long day. I walked 6 miles, you know, and I was really taking my shower and enjoying it. And then I hear that, you know, somebody's beating on the door, and, you know, and is very angry and very upset. So, you know, I quickly, you know, get myself in a presentable form, and I go out, and the lady is just, she has completely melted down over not being able to get in the room. And you know, and as abusive as possible, totally, you know, out of it. And I think, well, this is a good opportunity to practice, you know, if all this stuff that I'm learning, if it's any good, you know, like, this is the time, you know, this is, utilize it. So, you know, you try to, you know, calm the people down, you know, get them down. And, you know, and that 10 minutes in their life had been a total devastation, but able to do it. And then understand that. And then but I noticed that I picked up a lot of negative energy. I mean, you know, some people can be quite abusive. It's in our culture right now, it's, we actually reward the most abusive, it seems, in some ways. And so I went back and, you know, sat down to meditate and go in, and I found that all this energy was arising in the mind. And then some of these techniques that I'm working with, you can take the energy that comes up, you know, from anger, like I could have an angry reaction to that person, or I could utilize that energy to dissipate things within my own being, you know, to transform my consciousness. So I take full advantage of the energy, the opportunity, and go into a deeper, you know, meditation, and have a great time. And then at 10:45, another customer, you know, loses their keys, and they come back from, you know, and so, but, you know, these are good opportunities to grow, but they're around us all the time, and we can utilize that energy to transform our consciousness. So it's not like bring it on, but like, I'll do my best, you know, and I'll keep trying. Anyway, thanks for sharing and triggering that memory. Anything else?
But Ben, what you actually did with them to able to calm them down, you know, working with the energy with them, what do you do exactly?
Yeah, no, the easiest way when people are totally upset is, you know, just tell them, I'll refund your money. And, you know, in that situation, and even with that, like, the lady was very upset, and I wasn't, you know, even trying to do things with energy to calm them down. I was trying to keep myself, you know, staying centered in myself, so I wasn't angry and exploding at them. And but, you know, it was interesting, even with the you know, it's just like, we want customers to be happy, so we say, okay, we'll refund your money. And then and she says, okay, I'm ready. And she's starting to pick up her stuff and go. But then her husband reminds her that, you know, there are no rooms in Santa Cruz. This is Friday night, you know, and it's totally booked everywhere. They're 3 hours from home, and they have 2 little kids. And so then she goes into a different kind of meltdown, and her husband are having their altercation, their interaction. And so, you know, I immediately, you know, just try to dissipate the thing and just say, okay, you guys stay here. We're still going to refund your money. You spend the night, you know, you take care of it. And finally, you know, she's speechless. The lady is, I mean, you know, and the guy, you know, he's not sure what to do, because his wife is totally upset with him. And, you know, and they don't know what to do. So I go make them new keys. They somehow or another, in going to dinner, they erase all their magnetic keys and do all that stuff, which is common. But most people don't get quite that upset. But I don't go in and try to smooth them out with energy or do anything there to affect them. I try to stay centered in myself so that I can, you know, hopefully respond in a Christ-like way, or be of service, and not make the situation worse. And sometimes in business, that's very difficult.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
so you do your best.
Good.
And probably the most challenging thing I find is customer service people are always, you know, sometimes, you know, you need help desperately, and they can't do anything. And so it's easy to see how well you can control your consciousness. you get frustrated and scream at them? Do you blame them for the problem? Or do you say, I know it's not you. Can you help me solve this? And try to proceed in a civilized way.
Okay, good. Great, thank you.
Yes. Anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to mention that during your presentations is a wonderful time to meditate. I found that when Audley would talk, that sometimes I would just completely turn off and become calm, peaceful. And so I've noticed that happens to me when I'm listening to your lectures, that I'll just nod off and take go off into the beyond. So it's been a really a pleasant experience, and that's why I recorded, because I have to watch it later.
Well, I know what you're saying. I used to do that with Audley also, and only a couple of times did I fall asleep and start snoring, and everybody got a real kick out of that. But no, it is very useful if someone is tuning into that flow. And I found, like with Audley in particular, doing a lecture, I can close my eyes and just go all the way into wherever he's going. And that's why I like going back and listening to his lectures, and looking at his writings and drawings and things like that.
One other thing that I've noticed, because I've been transcribing his lectures, at least some of the series, that and I think Catherine mentioned this, that memory fails you, even though you sat through the lecture and you may have listened to it again. But when you transcribe it, you see so many new things that you never realized before. It's
Right.
really kind of a blessing, because he gave us information sort of in between the lines,
Yeah,
which is pretty amazing.
it truly is. And in fact, one of the texts I was reading this last week, it talked about one of the lamas, and when he spoke, it reminded me what the person wrote that was writing the book. Said, when he spoke, he would go in with sometimes a defined set of bullets that he wanted to talk about, but he would often just tune into the group, and he would talk about this for a little bit, and this for a little bit, and this for a little bit. And he said when we'd go back and transcribe them, all of the points seemed unrelated. But but if you listen to the people as they were leaving, they all said, "Wow, I've had that question for years, and he just answered it. I didn't even have to ask it." And Audley was notorious for tuning into the group and delivering the message there. And that's one of the reasons I found it, like in transcribing a lot of his stuff also, is it doesn't turn into a book when you transcribe it. It's like it turns into a number of comments to a different group of people that was answering what they needed. But as you look at it and kind of organize it and synthesize it, you do find that there's all kinds of you could say hidden messages or detailed messages in between the lines, or there's a lot of stuff there that you can go back to. And that's why I encourage people to go back and listen to them, to make notes on it, to study, really study and apply it to their life, because you find out all kinds of things. I'm doing it constantly. And it's, and sometimes when I go in and speak inside, it doesn't take me back to something there, but it takes me maybe to another tradition or another text, and I can apply that and see. And I find that it's remarkable how helpful it can be in changing your life. If there's no other questions, there's a couple of comments. I know there's a lot of people probably have had to go, but there's a couple of things in the tantric traditions. They talk about the one question that often arises is what's the memory that carries us? What do we carry between lifetimes? How do we carry consciousness? It's just like you don't remember exactly who you were in that time, or you may remember, but you look somewhat different, and you have different ideas, and you have a different karmic load, and you speak a different language now, and different things. So what is the essence or the true part of ourself that comes together. And in the Tibetan tradition, and I'll get more information on this and do a talk at some point, but there's considered to be 2 drops. And they simply refer to them as drops because they look like a small drop of energy or liquid. But when at birth or at conception, and it may not be until actually the birth process, but the white dot or the white form of energy actually forms at the top of the head, and that comes from the father. And the red drop that forms, it comes from the mother, but it usually centered in the solar plexus. And one of the things that happens in the advanced tantric practices is those 2 different drops of energy are brought together in the heart. And when that happens, that's the same process that happens when you die. That's what happens when the energies come back together and they depart the body, the form. So they talk about the Tibetan Book of the Dead or the living and the dying process. If you can master that while you're still alive, that whole process of going through that and bringing those back together, then you can make that transition much easier. In fact, you can do it consciously, and sometimes that's necessary. But the real component, I think that I got from a lot of that information is that the male and the female parts are both within each one of us. And, we often think like for me in a male body, I think the female, that part is a separate part. And so there's an attraction, there's drawing to it, or different things. But that part, when we're looking for the female, for me, you're looking for the female outside, you never find anyone that satisfies that longing. When you find that part within yourself, then it comes into completion. And it's the same in the female looking for the male, looking for it outside of the self or outside of the body. And it's just like, again, we have our mistaken sense of identity and thinking we're the form, but really we're not this form. We're the light force or the energy, the awareness, the God self, the self that created this form and expresses through it. But when we get down in and start thinking we're, go along with the mistaken idea that we're just the body, then we look outside of ourselves rather than inside of ourselves for all components. And I think the beauty in finding, someone that helps you to realize that within yourself is phenomenal. And that's what a guru or a teacher or someone who knows the path can help you to become aware of that inner part of yourself and hopefully bring balance. And as a lot of these things surface, you find various components of your own consciousness or experiences in your mind, or maybe biases or angers that you have that have caused you to distort and to not see clearly in some way. And I think for me, one thing I realized recently is I had a lot of anger toward the female, toward women, toward that part. And so not able to see that well within myself, not able to relate to it well in the world. And so it's a way to help understand what you are, and then to resolve and to drop some of those incorrect ideas, or that, I guess, the fallacy in thinking. Anyway, that's just 2 cents for what it's worth. And that's all I really have to say. I'll talk about that more in coming lectures. And again, if anyone has topics that they would like to hear about, some of the things coming, or talking about meditation and why to do it, how to develop more focused concentration. That's key to making any of this work. And then I'll launch into some stuff on the Yoga Sutras, which is more in the tradition, in the Kriya tradition, root text in terms of that. And then working through, I want to spend, a couple of months or so going through some of Dr. Thin's work and trying to revive that in people's consciousness and help that become a little easier. So nothing else. I'm done. If you have questions or anything else, do you want to speak? Yes. Somebody say something? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Enjoy your week. Have fun. Learn something new and teach me.
Yeah,
help me to be better.